gigawatts. Hey y'all, this is Sam with the Roots of Change podcast, and today we are talking about artificial intelligence and its climate impacts. We are going back to the future and talking about the stories that big tech is trying to tell us and the lies that are beneath that and what that actually means for our world. And we're also going to get into, in the second half of the episode, GOP messaging, because big tech and GOP are very much intrinsically tied together right now, and they have been for a few years now. And we're now awakening to that because of Trump's presidency. But I want to uncover some of the things and tactics that they have used in the last few years to get us to where we are today. Because we often talk about how these things like feel inevitable, like how did we get here, how did we get here? And a lot of the reasons we got to a Trump's America in 2025 is because we ignored the clear signals that were happening prior to 2024. And a lot of that is through the elite capture that Joe Cardillo and I talked about last week. So much of this is about the elite capture of our tech, our media, and our lives. When we look at the 10 gigawatts, that is how much energy it is going to take for a new data center that OpenAI and NVIDIA are now using. It was a $100 billion deal between NVIDIA and OpenAI, and that is going to take up the energy of 8 million households. And that is something that impacts all of us, because when I was driving throughout the Southwest and throughout this country, frankly, during the election in October, and then again for this road trip, I saw data centers everywhere, and they are building them in poor and rural communities. They are intentionally building them in places that they know communities can't fight back. And we have seen the steady chipping away of collective action and collective bargaining because of the takeover of the Supreme Court, which we have written extensively about, and the history of Mr. Leonard Leo and all of his friends and some of my friends. And we see how that is tied in with big tech, because so much of the Supreme Court and the GOP agenda is to deregulate business. It is to make sure that the colonizers have all of the power and that we as individuals can't really fight back. Because how can I, as an individual, fight back against a giant data center when NVIDIA and OpenAI have $100 billion in the deal, and I'm just a person who owns a trailer in the neighborhood? You know, these are real stories that are really happening today. And it's all tying back to a lot of the things that are happening in the news right now. So I wanted to touch on a few news items today before we get into GOP strategy and GOP messaging. While I was on the road during the election, I picked up some of the flyers, and I just want to show you what I learned from them and how it relates to my upbringing in Dallas, Texas, in Christian nationalism, because a lot of the messaging that we're seeing today can be easily combated. We just have to understand what they're actually saying, how we interpret it, and then how we push back against that in our own messaging and shift the conversation. So much of this is about playing on their playing field, and we need to recognize what's truly happening in terms of the elite capture, in terms of big tech and the GOP shaking hands and becoming best buddies so that they can now do the things that they are doing right now. So we talked about the OpenAI and NVIDIA deal. There's also a ton of other deals that OpenAI is doing right now, and that's something to really watch out for, because when we're looking at the news media, most of the news media has been completely captured by the billionaire class and big tech. Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, in 2018. And I remember sitting, and this will date this experience, I was sitting at a WeWork in the Bay Area and listening to the Washington Post reps talk to me and say, our coverage isn't going to change. Don't you worry. You still buy ads from us. We're a great paper. We're progressive. We're democratic. The Washington Post, you know who we are. And of course, we now see that they are taking a lot more control over their content right now. But that's not the first time that they've done that. And I think a lot of people miss that. I've been having different conversations with different folks, and I mentioned this experience, and someone was like, well, now they're doing it. And we really need to caution ourselves to see that longer history, because Jeff Bezos buying the Washington Post in 2018 was a deliberate attempt to suppress tech news. How come we don't have robust news about tech and big tech and anything that actually pushes back and tells the truth about what's happening in Silicon Valley and all around big tech? It's because of the elite capture of our media. Jeff Bezos made a very specific decision in 2018. He knew what he was doing, and he started suppressing tech news immediately. Because as soon as that bald man is at the top of the pyramid, things change. You can't tell me that people don't self-censor themselves, that management wants to stick in line and they want to keep their jobs. That immediately changed. And so we've been living through the ramifications of not having a robust tech news media for some time. And so that's part of why the Roots of Change Agency exists, because no one's talking about this. And so, uplifting 404 Media, Tech Policy Press, I've been really enjoying their content. There's a lot of folks who are doing really good tech news. They are just a little bit more underground because the mainstream media obviously doesn't have the incentive to want to tell the truth about big tech. So that's kind of the framework around how we're talking about this news. The other pieces of news I wanted to share was, one, Deutsche Bank, which has its own problems, but it is a major player in the banking industry, announced that artificial intelligence is a giant bubble that is about ready to pop. And they were the most clear that I've seen in a really long time, because a lot of the economists and the Fed and others are really trying to obscure the messed up economy that we have right now, where all the money is up here and it's not at all down here. Now we are seeing that over 60% of the United States wealth is at the top 10%. That's wild. And the bottom 50% has like 1 or 2% of the wealth. We wonder why we are in these systems and why we're in these structures. It's because of this steady chipping away. And we've been growing the wealth gap for years and years and years. And now we're getting to this crisis point, which, at what point do we call things crisis points? Because I could argue that crisis points happened a lot long ago. This is a big game changer, because someone that is in the economic class is actually saying the truth about artificial intelligence. It's very clear to see when we talk about this NVIDIA OpenAI deal and all the other deals that you hear about with OpenAI and any of the other AI companies. So many of them are, pardon the phrase, but they're circle jerks. They are just circling the money around. And it's not actually doing anything for the product, for the business, or the society. And so we have to be really aware of that, because again, the news are not going to share that in a direct way. They're going to be like, well, Trump made this really smart move about Trump RX, and we have to then see that as what it is, put our glasses on and put that like elite capture glasses on and really understand, what are they trying to say? How are they trying to frame this conversation versus what's the truth underneath it? So there's that piece. And then another deal from OpenAI is that they are extorting Samsung electronics. And this is really important, because we're going to get into AI and what it actually is. And we've talked about this with Dr. Linda Berberich on our podcast, so definitely check out that past episode. But when we talk about AI, so much of it is being trained off of stolen content and stolen data. It's all of our content, it's all of our data. Anything that you've ever put on the internet that is up and open, they have probably stolen it and taken it. And that includes a lot of copyrighted material. And they are being very aggressive about this. So this is why I refer to them as colonizers, because they are colonizing our content. They don't care who owns that content. They don't care why it is. They are just going to gobble it up, because the more content, the better for AI. And I'm going to tell you why that's wrong in a second. But that's their ethos, right? Gobble, gobble, gobble. The more content, the better my AI is going to be, because I'm going to have more information to sift through. And so they don't care who they take it from. So they're taking this content from actual large media companies like Samsung Electronics, which produces video games, and then they are selling the AI tools back to them. And so this is a huge issue. We're seeing this in the film industry too. They trained their data on all of this art, all of this content that real people produced. You know, like Pixar, you think about Pixar, for example. There is hours and hours of work involved in animation, and they gobbled all of that up, and then they're selling back a shittier product to say, here, now you can make Pixar movies faster. You don't need the people that made the thing that now allows you to do it more cheaply. And so, you know, we think about that. There's so many different layers to AI, and it's hard to even get to every single layer, because it's just, the more you dig, the more you see just how bullshit it is. And that's the biggest message that we really need to get across, is like, AI is wasting our times, and it's making us worse off as a society and as people. I think the biggest thing when we talk about regulation and we talk about big tech is that the individualization of responsibility. And this is why I say big tech is making enemies of us, because they are individualizing the responsibilities. If you say, like, oh, I'm not very smart because of tech, or oh, I can't do this because of tech, a lot of that is because of the way that these bros are designing the tech. It has nothing to do with you and whether you are smart enough or not. It has to do with the fact that these tools are being designed by a small subset of people, and they think that they know everything, so they're not going to ask anyone else. They're going to make those products, and they aren't going to work for most people, because they don't know how most people want to use those products. And that's, again, why you see all of these like products and companies coming out, and you're like, what? OpenAI friend? Like, why do I want a friend? That's kind of weird, right? How many people just want to only be friends with a robot? There's some really great ads up in the New York subway right now that are like, you never have to binge watch alone, which is just like, you're still watching it alone if you're watching it with a computer, an AI. Like, that's so sad. How is that a solution to our world? It's not. It only entrenches this dystopian world further and further. And you ask, why does that product even exist? It's because the types of people who are creating these products just don't have the expansive understanding of how our world is working. They don't talk to other people. They do not interact with other cultures. They don't ask people. And so that's what we get, is we get the shitified products. And then when these products don't work, it's so easy for us now to individualize the blame. Oh, it is my fault that I don't know how to use this product, or it is customer service's fault, so I'm going to yell at this person for, hours. And then it gets to the regulation part, because we go back to the data centers, and folks cannot fight back against these massive corporations by themselves. And that is 100% the design of where we are right now, because big tech and the GOP and big business, they've been shaking hands for a really long time. While I was on the road, one of the books that I listened to was called Reaganland. It is a 43-hour book. So wade in with caution. If you really want to dig into it, it covers the 70s in a very deep and extensive way. It's all of, how Reagan built his power before his presidency, and it talks a lot about the Carter administration. And you see a lot of the same tactics that they're using today. They tested those out back in the 70s with Carter. And the deregulation is something that has been happening and been started in that process back then. And so a lot of the things that we are coming to fruition now are because of these conversations that were happening back in the 70s before we even had a big tech to think about. And so that's the thing that we have to really recognize is, again, when I talked about the intersecting issues on Monday's podcast, we have to recognize that all of these are intersecting, and we have to kind of do that work for ourselves. We need to remind each other that that is the case. Because I think, the loneliness epidemic, a lot of big tech is designed to keep us siloed, to keep us afraid, to keep us locked in their data, in their algorithms, so that they can continue to exploit us for our data and all of the other things. And so we have to be very intentional about countering that. And one of the ways that we can counter that is to see the all in the conversation instead of just the me. And so that's something that I encourage definitely with organizations is, as you're messaging, really try to think about, are you moving that into a we scenario? Are we talking about the collective? Are we talking about power with, or are we talking about power over? And so 1 second before we get into kind of those solutions and the conversations, because now I do want to get into our newest solution, which I'm so excited about. It's so dorky for me to love this, but I have really found that zines have been working really well for our outreach. When I was driving around the country, I gave out zines, and a lot of people were really excited about them. So people are really hungry for this type of media, like the kind of media that's not traditional. People want to get off social media, and so they get really excited. We do have one called the Social Care zine, and so that's a good one for that. But this is our What is AI Really zine. It is hot off the presses, so you can get it on our website, you can print it out, or you can get it on digital. But this really digs into the history of what AI truly is, which is essentially marketing. It's just marketing. I'm gonna share in the show notes our deep dive on AI. But one of the things to note is really this first tip here, which is intelligence is labeling. We talk so much about how big tech is really smart, and AI is like this all-powerful knowing thing. But again, we have to think about, what is that truly? Because AI is actually just a bunch of data and a bunch of content, and that's why they need all the data centers, because they need to house all of the shit that they've stolen from us. And they need a lot of water, and they need a lot of energy to make that happen, because that is where they get the intelligence. It's about how they label our data and our content, so that then when you go out and ask a question, or you want the AI to do something for you, it kind of knows how to do it, because it goes back and says, okay, these are all the things that relate to what this query is about. And so it's really not that intelligent. And when we talk about the AI getting things wrong, messing up, an AI hallucination, we really have to stop using that word, because they're not hallucinating. They're just getting it wrong. The tech doesn't work the way that people think it does. And so, yeah, it's going to recommend glue on a pizza because a few people jokingly recommended that on Reddit a few years back, and the AI doesn't know that that's a joke versus a real recipe recommendation. And so a lot of AI is about the flattening of information, and we're seeing that the flattening of information really serves the fascists. It serves authoritarianism, Because if we don't have experts and we don't have people to listen to, then who are the people that you listen to? The people with power. And who currently has power? The people who have been building it and working to grab hold of the power for the last few decades. And so we get into that in the zine as well in terms of the pale male database and no black jobs. It very much impacts our white supremacist society, and it entrenches and deepens the inequities that we're already seeing. And this was what was so frustrating when the marketing term AI came out in 2022, because everyone was like, oh my God, this amazing new technology. And we had just had the 2020 uprisings around Black Lives Matter. And this is very much a tool to keep us trapped inside those systems. I want to read this quote from Joy Buolamwini, who is an amazing academic, expert, AI expert. She has done so much work. Definitely check out the Algorithmic Justice League for any resources on how to understand AI, how to understand tech, how to protect yourself from tech. They have a really good resource right now about airport security. So this quote on data colonialism. Just like colonial powers had exploited the bodies and mineral wealth of Africa, now digital bodies were being extracted to build the wealth of foreign companies. Was I contributing to the ongoing exploitation of people like me? So just things to think about. Definitely print out this zine. You can find it at rootschangemedia.com/zines. And we have printing instructions and folding instructions. But I definitely want to get the word out about AI. The more that we use it, the more it impacts our organizing and our movements. Like if you're using AI, really ask, how are you using it, and is it serving you? Is it allowing you to be strategic? Is it allowing you to stay within your values? Because that's the thing that I found is when I was kind of testing it out at the beginning of the hype, I just realized this is just a bunch of junk. Like, no offense to all of the random stuff online, but like I think that I have a little bit more strategy in my mind and my ability to build messaging that is a little bit more human, a little bit more fun, a little bit more activating than an AI. Because I kept asking it for things and I was like, this is just punching out a bunch of marketing speak that I hate and have had to like, I'm literally going away from my marketing career and now you're trying to get me to speak like a marketer again, and I don't want to do that. So we don't use any AI. A lot of, I think actually, sorry, I will say one, we use AI for our interviews and for our lives. And for captions, which I'm trying to find a better solution for captions, and I hope to find one soon, but TBD on that. But that is something that I found is it was actually just wasting more time, because I can add more strategic organizing and project planning into my day to allow me to save time than it would be for me to do and try to create the AI around something that I wanted it to be. So for example, when I edit these videos, I will select different timestamps to say like, this would be great for a clip, a promotional clip. This would be great for a YouTube short. And so I can document that all throughout my planning process. And then when I'm done, I have a fully planned out episode and I have a bunch of clips. And that was me saving time and automating my work rather than relying on a tool that doesn't really know me, that doesn't know what I'm trying to do, and frankly is actually the opposite of what I'm trying to do. And so it's always going to be wrong because it's always going to go against my values, which are the opposite of marketing. I'm not trying to annoy you. I'm not trying to lie to you. I'm not trying to manipulate you. And a lot of what AI felt like was that type of language. So that's why we don't use AI here at the Roots of Change Agency. Okay, let's get into GOP messaging because this was quite an interesting experience.